Grass was born into an ordinary civil servant family in a small northern city. Her father worked in an administrative office, her mother was a middle school teacher. Their lives revolved around modest, steady salaries, enough to get by, but never enough to save. The house where Grass grew up was a small, aging home, its walls stained with time, its tiled roof dripping rain whenever a storm passed. On nights when the electricity went out, the family would gather around an oil lamp, eating dinner and telling stories. Her childhood was filled with warmth and love, but also marked by scarcity. From an early age, Grass knew her life was different from many of her classmates. While others had money for toys or new clothes, she wore hand-me-downs and rarely enjoyed luxuries. Meals were simple, rice and vegetables, with meat or fish only on rare occasions. Yet she never complained. She loved her parents and understood they gave her everything they could. But deep inside, those hardships planted a dream. One day I will not live like this. I will live with freedom and abundance, so my parents will no longer struggle. Grass excelled in school. She loved books, and her curiosity drove her to learn more about the world beyond her small town. Through years of hard work, she consistently ranked among the top students, making her parents proud. Despite financial difficulties, they saved enough to send her to extra classes, hoping she would earn a place at a good university. For Grass, education was the only path she saw to break free from the cycle of scarcity. At 18, Grass was accepted into a major economics university in Hanoi. It was the first turning point in her life. Arriving in the city, she felt both excitement and anxiety. Her family scraped together money for her tuition and rented room. On the day she left, her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "Study hard, my child. With a stable job, your life will be different." That blessing became both her motivation and her burden throughout the years that followed. As a student, Grass immediately saw the gap between rich and poor again. Many classmates drove expensive scooters, carried the latest smartphones, wore stylish clothes and ate in trendy cafes. Meanwhile, she relied on a worn bicycle, a basic phone and a frugal lifestyle. Sometimes she felt embarrassed, but she reminded herself, "I wasn't given what they have, but I can make up for it with persistence." To lighten her family's burden, Grass worked part-time from her first year, handing out flyers in the heat, working as a cashier, tutoring children. Every coin she earned mattered. Though exhausting, it gave her pride. She wasn't entirely dependent on her parents. After 4 demanding years, Grass graduated with solid grades and secured a job at a foreign company with a starting salary of more than 10 million VND per month, a figure many of her peers envied. When she received her first paycheck, tears filled her eyes. She called her mother, "Mom, I got my salary. From now on, I can send money home every month." For a moment, she believed she was finally on the right track, but reality soon set in. Each month, her salary disappeared quickly. 3 million for rent, 2 or 3 million for food, nearly 1 million for transport, plus money sent home and the occasional social obligation or small purchase. By the end of the month, there was nothing left. She realized that even if her salary increased, expenses would grow too. The cycle of earn and spend seemed endless. The office job, once exciting, turned into a monotonous grind. Crowded buses every morning, 8 hours staring at a computer screen, they're coming home exhausted with barely enough energy to cook dinner. On weekends, she wanted only to sleep. She looked at her older colleagues. Some had worked 10 or 15 years, climbing to higher salaries, yet they were still trapped by mortgages, car loans and school fees. They had no real freedom. Fear crept into Grass's heart. Will I become like them in 10 years? Always working, always tired, never truly wealthy. Night after night, she lay awake, wrestling with the question. Then came an unexpected turning point. At her company's year-end party in a luxurious 5-star hotel, she saw another world. Gleaming chandeliers, luxury cars lined up outside, and elegant guests moving with confidence and calm. Watching them, Grass felt a surge of awe and envy. In that moment, a question struck her like lightning. Why can they live like this while I cannot? They are human too, not gods. That night, back in her cramped rented room, Grass could not sleep. The dim yellow light, the sound of traffic outside, the narrow walls closing in, it all fueled her restlessness. A voice echoed within, "I cannot live like this forever. I must change. I must find the path to true freedom and wealth." From that night onward, a seed was planted in her mind, a seed called ambition, and that seed would soon grow, reshaping her entire destiny. In the weeks following that sleepless night, Grass felt as if a door had cracked open in her mind. At work, she still carried out her duties, answering emails, preparing reports, attending endless meetings. But her thoughts often wandered. The image of the wealthy guests at the hotel, their effortless confidence, replayed in her mind like a persistent vision. What did they know that she didn't? What rules were they playing by? Her search for answers began almost unintentionally. One weekend, while browsing through a bookstore to escape the noise of her cramped apartment, her eyes fell on a book with a bold title, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She had heard of it before, but never paid much attention. That day she felt compelled to buy it. That night, under the dim light of her desk lamp, Grass devoured the book. With each page her world began to shift. She discovered that the poor and middle class worked for money, while the rich made money work for them. She learned the difference between assets and liabilities, realizing that most people mistook liabilities for assets and remained trapped in debt. These insights struck her like thunderbolts. She felt both exhilarated and ashamed. How could she have studied economics for 4 years and never encountered this knowledge? One sentence etched itself into her mind. The rich buy assets. The poor only have expenses. The middle class buys liabilities they think are assets. Grass recognized with a sinking heart that she was walking the path of the middle class, working diligently, dreaming of a house and a car that would only tie her to more debt. If she didn't change course, she would spend her life serving banks and companies, never herself. She didn't stop at one book. Soon her small room was crowded with titles such as The Richest Man in Babylon, Think and Grow Rich, and Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Each book dismantled another layer of her old thinking, replacing it with new perspectives. She began to understand that wealth wasn't merely about money, it was about mindset, discipline, and long-term vision. But this shift in thinking caused friction. During lunch breaks, when colleagues discussed buying new clothes or upgrading their phones, Grass remained silent. When she skipped outings to save money or stayed home reading instead of joining karaoke nights, her friends teased her. "Grass, why are you suddenly acting like an old lady? You're young. You should enjoy life." She smiled politely, though doubt gnawed at her. Was she being foolish? Should she simply relax and live like everyone else? Her parents, too, were uneasy. When she explained her desire to save aggressively and invest instead of spend, they grew concerned. "Stability matters," her father reminded her. "Don't take risks. A steady job, some savings in the bank. That's enough." Grass adored her parents, but she knew their advice was rooted in fear, not vision. Even so, their lack of understanding stung. Late at night, when loneliness pressed down on her, she turned to her journal. She poured out her fears. What if I fail? What if I lose money? What if everyone is right and I'm just chasing illusions? But on the next page, she wrote her dreams. What if I succeed? What if I build wealth, create freedom, help my family, and inspire others? One evening, she attended a free financial workshop at a small co-working space. The speaker, an energetic woman in her 40s, delivered a message that pierced her heart. If you don't learn how to invest, you will spend your life working to pay bills. Your job is not your security, your knowledge and assets are. That night, Grass returned home trembling with conviction. The truth was simple, even harsh. If she didn't change now, she would remain stuck forever. That realization solidified into determination. She took action. She eliminated unnecessary expenses, coffee shops, impulse shopping, weekend indulgences. She created a strict budget and resolved to save 30% of her income each month, no exceptions. Every expense was tracked in a notebook, every dollar given a purpose. She began following entrepreneurs online, watching interviews, absorbing their experiences. Her perception of the world shifted. Walking down the street, she no longer just saw shops. She wondered about their owners, their profit margins, their business models. Watching the news, she no longer skimmed headlines. She analyzed markets, opportunities, global trends. Gradually, her eyes adjusted to a new perspective, the perspective of value creation and financial independence. And yet, doubts persisted. Some nights she wept quietly, overwhelmed by the distance between where she was and where she longed to be. But deep inside, something fundamental had changed. She no longer accepted drifting in the comfort of mediocrity. She had chosen a new identity. Not merely an employee, but an investor in training, a future entrepreneur. The world around her remained unchanged. Her cramped apartment, her modest salary, her skeptical friends. But Grass herself was no longer the same. She had taken the first real step toward wealth, the step of transforming her mindset. With her mindset shifting, Grass knew that change would mean little without action. Ideas were powerful, but without discipline and consistent effort, they would remain only dreams. She made a vow to herself, "I will not just think like the wealthy, I will start acting like them, even if my resources are small." The first battlefield was her own finances. For the first time, she treated her salary not as something to spend, but as a tool to build her future. She created a strict budget. Rent, food, transport, and family support were neatly categorized, while a non-negotiable 30% of her income was labeled wealth fund. That money was sacred. It would never be touched for entertainment, impulse purchases, or short-term pleasures. At first, the discipline was harsh. She had to say no to weekend outings, resist the lure of sales at her favorite shops, and brew her own coffee instead of buying it. Friends rolled their eyes. "Grass, you're too extreme." But inside, she felt a quiet pride every time she resisted. Each small act of discipline was proof that she controlled her money, not the other way around. Her next step was learning to invest. She started cautiously, putting small amounts into the stock market. At first, she made classic mistakes, buying stocks because of rumors, panicking when prices fell, selling too quickly when they rose. She lost money more than once, and each loss stung. On some evenings, staring at her shrinking account balance, she felt foolish. But rather than giving up, she treated these mistakes as tuition fees. "I'm paying for lessons the hard way," she told herself. She consumed books on investing, studied financial statements, and followed experienced investors online. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. She learned to distinguish speculation from true investing, to separate chasing quick gains from building long-term wealth. At the same time, Grass took on small freelance jobs after work. With her background in finance and her growing digital skills, she offered services such as budgeting help, financial planning, and even content writing for small businesses. Most evenings, after long hours at the office, she sat at her desk with weary eyes, typing late into the night. The pay was modest, but every extra dollar went directly into her wealth fund. Sometimes exhaustion nearly broke her. Her body ached, her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she pressed on. "This is temporary," she whispered. "One day I won't have to trade my time like this, but for now, every effort builds my foundation." Her friends noticed her growing seriousness and teased her more. "You work all day and then work all night. For what? Life is short. Enjoy it while you can." Grass smiled gently but didn't explain. She knew they couldn't see the vision in her mind. A future where money worked for her, where she wasn't chained to an office desk. Gradually, her small sacrifices bore fruit. After 2 years, her savings had grown significantly, and her investment portfolio was no longer just numbers. It produced dividends, modest but real. For the first time, she felt the thrill of passive income. The moment she received her first dividend payment, she stared at the notification on her phone for minutes, tears in her eyes. "I earned money while I slept," she whispered. It was small, but it was revolutionary. Still, her path was not smooth. She invested in a small real estate project with a friend, only to discover later that she had overlooked hidden fees and risks. The deal did not collapse, but her profits were far less than she had hoped. She was angry at herself for being careless. Yet even then, she refused to let failure define her. She kept careful notes of every mistake, determined never to repeat them. Through it all, Grass discovered something more important than money, the growth of her character. She became more patient, less impulsive. She developed the habit of delayed gratification, sacrificing short-term pleasures for long-term rewards. She became curious and analytical, questioning every decision before making it. By the 5th year since her journey began, Grass was no longer the same person who once cried over a paycheck that vanished too quickly. Her wealth fund had grown into a respectable cushion. Her investments, still modest compared to the wealthy she admired, were working steadily. Her freelance work had not only boosted her income, but also expanded her skills and confidence. Most importantly, she had built a track record with herself, proof that discipline, persistence, and learning worked. Grass looked around her small apartment, still modest but transformed in meaning. It was no longer a symbol of struggle, but a workshop of growth. Every book on the shelf, every spreadsheet on her laptop, every note in her journal testified to the hours she had invested in her future. She was not rich yet, but she was undeniably on her way. The accumulation phase had been slow, frustrating, and exhausting. But Grass knew one thing. Without these years of discipline and sacrifice, no dream of financial freedom could become reality. She had laid the foundation, brick by brick, and soon it would be time to build higher. By the time Grass reached her late 20s, years of discipline and small victories had reshaped her life. She was no longer the young graduate anxiously stretching each paycheck. She now had a financial cushion, a growing stock portfolio, and the quiet confidence that came from proving to herself that she could change her destiny. Yet she knew that accumulation alone was not enough. To truly break free, she needed to step into a larger arena, where she was not just saving and investing on the side, but creating wealth as her full-time pursuit. The turning point came when her company announced another restructuring. Rumors of layoffs spread through the office. Grass was not on the list, but she watched colleagues pack their desks with trembling hands, their futures suddenly uncertain. That evening, walking home through the busy streets, she realized something stark. Even the best jobs could disappear overnight. If she relied only on her salary, she would never have true security. Real security had to be built on her own terms. It was then she made her decision. Grass would leave her job and step fully into the world of professional investing and entrepreneurship. The thought frightened her. For years, her parents had told her that stability was everything. To them, quitting a good job sounded reckless, even dangerous. When she told her family, her father frowned. "Grass, don't gamble with your life. A steady job is better than risky dreams." Her mother asked gently, "What if it doesn't work? What if you lose everything?" Grass listened quietly, her heart aching, but her resolve unshaken. She knew their words came from love and fear, not vision. "I understand," she said softly, "but I don't want to look back in 10 years and regret never trying." Her first steps were careful. She did not burn her bridges all at once. She saved a year's worth of expenses, tied up loose ends at work, and set clear goals. Then, with trembling hands and a pounding heart, she handed in her resignation. The day she walked out of the office for the last time, the city air felt different, lighter, sharper, full of possibility. Grass divided her energy between two paths, investing more seriously and building her own business. On the investing side, she refined her stock portfolio, moving away from speculation toward long-term holdings in strong companies. She studied real estate more deeply, learning to evaluate locations, yields, and hidden costs. Her first rental property had been modest, but her second, purchased after months of research, became a steady stream of income that covered much of her living expenses. The feeling was surreal. Her roof was paid for not by her labor, but by her assets. On the entrepreneurial side, she drew on skills gained during her freelance years. She launched a small financial consulting practice, helping young professionals manage budgets, start saving, and learn basic investing. At first, clients were scarce and income unpredictable. Some months she doubted herself, staring at her bank statements late at night. But each client she helped strengthened her belief that she was creating value, and slowly word spread. Challenges came relentlessly. Deals fell apart, investments underperformed, competitors cut prices. More than once she sat at her desk in tears, wondering if her parents had been right. But then she would wipe her face, open her journal, and remind herself, "This is the life I chose. This is the price of freedom." As months turned into years, momentum grew. Her consulting practice attracted corporate clients who wanted financial literacy workshops for their employees. Her reputation expanded, and she was invited to speak at events and share her story. At the same time, her investments matured. Her stock portfolio paid consistent dividends, and her real estate brought steady cash flow. She was no longer scraping by. She was building momentum. The breakthrough came with her third property, a small apartment in a rising neighborhood. Grass bought it below market value after careful negotiation, renovated it and rented it at a premium. The monthly cash flow stunned her. For the first time, her passive income not only covered her expenses, but left a surplus. She could live without touching her savings or her consulting income. The dream she once thought impossible, earning money while sleeping, free from dependence on a paycheck, was now real. Looking back, Grass saw that the hardest step had been leaving her job. Everything after that was persistence, adaptation, and courage. Entrepreneurship taught her to lead, to take responsibility, to create value from nothing. Investing taught her patience, risk management, and the power of compounding. Together they became the twin engines of her wealth, and yet she did not feel triumphant. She felt humbled. Each gain carried the memory of struggle, each asset reminded her of the countless hours of sacrifice and self-belief. Standing in her rented office, watching her small team prepare workshop materials, she smiled quietly. She was no longer Grass the employee, no longer Grass the cautious dreamer. She was Grass the entrepreneur, the investor, the architect of her own freedom. The road ahead remained uncertain, filled with risks and challenges, but she had crossed the invisible threshold that few dared to approach. She was no longer playing the game of survival, she was playing the game of wealth. Success brought Grass not only relief, but also new challenges. When her consulting practice and investments began generating consistent income, she quickly realized something critical. Working harder was no longer enough. Her calendar was filled with client calls, workshops, property visits, and endless paperwork. If she continued like this, she would become her own employee, burned out, trapped in the very cycle she had fought so hard to escape. One evening, after completing back-to-back workshops, she sat at her desk exhausted, staring at the pile of receipts, contracts, and unanswered emails. Her mind echoed a lesson she had once read. The wealthy don't just build income, they build systems. That night, Grass made a decision. She would stop trying to do everything alone. The transformation began with delegation. She hired an assistant to manage her schedule and client communication. At first, she felt uneasy. No one could handle tasks as carefully as she did, she thought. But over time, she learned to trust, realizing that leadership meant empowering others rather than controlling everything. She built processes, standard templates for workshops, clear steps for onboarding clients, checklists for property management. Tasks that once consumed hours now ran smoothly without her constant attention. She also embraced technology. She invested in software to automate aspects of her business, financial tracking tools, automated email sequences for clients, property management platforms that handled rent collection and maintenance requests. Each new system freed her time, allowing her to think strategically rather than drown in details. With her business operating more efficiently, Grass turned her focus to expansion. Diversification became her mantra. She purchased another rental property in a developing district, this time negotiating not only with the seller but also with contractors to ensure renovations were cost-effective yet high quality. She studied market trends closely, understanding that timing mattered as much as location. Soon, her rental portfolio delivered stable, predictable cash flow, a safety net that few could dream of. Meanwhile, her stock portfolio matured. She no longer reacted to short-term market noise, but approached investing with calm and clarity. Dividends arrived consistently, reinvested to compound growth year after year. Grass began to see herself not just as an investor, but as a steward of capital, responsible, patient, and purposeful. Perhaps her most surprising move was stepping into the world of startups. Through her growing network, she met young entrepreneurs with innovative ideas but limited capital. Remembering her own struggles at the beginning, she decided to support them. Some ventures failed, teaching her the harsh lessons of risk, but a few thrived, bringing not only financial returns but also deep satisfaction. For Grass, investing in people was as rewarding as investing in assets. Alongside her financial expansions, something unexpected unfolded. Grass began to build a personal brand. At first, she casually shared her journey online, small posts about budgeting tips, lessons from failures, and reflections on her mindset. To her surprise, people resonated. Followers increased. Invitations arrived. Podcasts, panels, conferences. Soon, she was recognized not only as an investor and entrepreneur, but as an inspiration for young professionals seeking freedom. At her first major speaking event, standing in front of 100 eager faces, Grass felt her hands tremble. She spoke of her early days, the small apartment, the sleepless nights, the mistakes, and the tears. She told them that wealth was not about luck or privilege, but about mindset, discipline, and persistence. As she spoke, she saw hope ignite in her audience's eyes. And in that moment, she realized her journey was no longer just her own. Building systems, diversifying investments, and expanding her reach gave Grass more than money. They gave her freedom, time to think, time to create, time to give back. She no longer woke up worrying about bills. Instead, she woke up thinking about possibilities. How could she grow further? Whom could she help? What legacy could she build? Her life had transformed. Once a tired office worker bound to a paycheck, Grass had become a businesswoman, investor, mentor, and builder of systems. She was no longer chasing survival. She was creating abundance, not only for herself but also for those around her. And yet, she knew there was still one final chapter to write. Beyond income, beyond investments, beyond expansion lay the true prize she had always longed for: freedom and legacy. By her mid-30s, Grass's life looked nothing like the modest beginnings she had once known. The girl who once counted every coin for bus fare now lived a life designed on her own terms. Her consulting business operated smoothly with a capable team. Her rental properties generated steady monthly income. Her stock portfolio and startup investments grew quietly in the background, compounding year after year. Money no longer dictated her choices. She dictated money's purpose. For the first time, Grass experienced what true freedom meant. It was not about extravagance or luxury. It was about waking up each morning without fear of bills, without the weight of financial chains. She could take a week off to travel with her parents, knowing her assets would continue working for her. She could spend entire afternoons mentoring young entrepreneurs without worrying about a lost paycheck. She could say no to projects that didn't align with her values and yes to opportunities that inspired her. But financial freedom, Grass realized, was only half the journey. The other half was meaning. As her wealth grew, so did her sense of responsibility. She remembered the evenings of her childhood when her parents counted their small salaries with furrowed brows, worrying about how to stretch it until the end of the month. She remembered the lonely nights in her cramped apartment, wondering if freedom was just a dream. Those memories remained as a reminder. Wealth is not for hoarding, it is for impact. With this conviction, Grass began to give back. She created scholarships for students from underprivileged families, ensuring that no child with talent would have to abandon education for lack of money. She supported financial literacy programs in schools, determined to teach young people the lessons she had learned the hard way. She even launched a small foundation to mentor women who wanted to break free from financial dependence and build their own futures. Her influence extended beyond money. Online, her story reached thousands who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles. On stage, she shared not only her triumphs, but also her failures. The lost investments, the sleepless nights, the tears. Don't be afraid of mistakes, she told them. Be afraid of never trying. Every failure you survive makes you stronger, wiser, and closer to freedom. One quiet evening, Grass sat by the window of her home, overlooking the city lights. A cup of tea warmed her hands. She thought back to her younger self, the girl lying awake in her tiny room, whispering, "I must change. I must find the path to freedom." That girl would hardly believe what she had become. Grass smiled softly, not with pride, but with gratitude, for the struggles that had shaped her, for the mentors and books that had guided her, and for the courage that had carried her through. She knew life would still bring challenges. Markets would rise and fall, businesses would face storms, but she also knew she was no longer afraid. She had built a foundation strong enough to endure and a heart determined enough to rebuild if needed. Wealth had given her not just comfort, but resilience, independence, and the ability to dream even bigger. As she closed her journal that night, Grass wrote a final reflection. True wealth is not measured by money alone. It is measured by freedom of choice, by the lives we touch, and by the legacy we leave behind. I am no longer chasing survival. I am living purpose. And this is only the beginning.